Good evening. Welcome to the Town of North Andover Finance Committee meeting. It is Tuesday, November 10th, 2020. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at northandovermass.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 99 or Verizon Channel 28, or online at northandovercam.org. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So it is now 7:03. We officially call this meeting to order. I'll do a roll call. Christine Allen?
Here.
Jennifer Burns-Lutz?
Here.
Kevin
I'm
Foley?
here.
Donovan O'Connell?
I'm here.
Justin Silk?
I'm here.
Regina Keene?
Here.
Thomas Ringler?
Here.
Edward McMillan?
Here.
All right, we have a fully attended meeting. I'll now ask that you please stand if you can, otherwise, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now I'm just checking my email for public comment. I have not received any public comment thus far. I just want to double check. Give everyone an opportunity to submit. Right. It looks like we have not received any public comment, so we can move forward. I also do want to mention that we will be revising the ability to submit public comment in the way that we do it. So hopefully that'll be coming for our next meeting. So it will be an opportunity for people to do that and us to correspond a little bit better than just the email. So we're working on that for the Finance Committee. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a review of the updated CARES Act spending. We have the Finance Director, Lynn Savage, on the line or joining us, and she can discuss an update on that spending.
Thank you, Sasha. So everybody received the copy of the COVID expense summary that I put together. This was as of yesterday's all year-to-date expenditures. So of course the 2020 FY20 expenses are at the 260,684, which I reported prior at several meetings ago. On the FY21 year-to-date expenditures, we have 1.9 million on the school side and 93,000 on the town side for a total of about $2 million. We have open POs still, a total of 278,000, and that's made up of 146 for school and 131 for town. Now these are purchases off of PPE or materials and supplies to make social distancing better. Jim can speak a little bit more to what they've purchased on the school side, a lot of technology for the remote learning and things like that. So overall, to date, as of yesterday, we've spent $2,540,693. So out of that 2.5, we have already received from federal government for the CARES Act funding $1.7 million. That's because that's what we have submitted and requested reimbursement for based on our projections. They give us a percentage of submitted to FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association, a submittal of $183,000. So that totals $1.9 million that we actually physically have the funding for. So that leaves still to be reimbursed to us for what we've already spent is $617,000. So the way this works is with the CARES Act money, we have originally put in estimates to them and based on what we believe we're going to spend. They do a calculation based on what they believe we'll get the percentage reimbursed through FEMA, and they pay us the difference. So that's what makes up the $1.7 million that we've already collected. Between now and December 31st, there'll be a reconciliation period, which means every expenditure that we've everything that we've purchased and spent, if we haven't received confirmation from FEMA that they're going to reimburse us, CARES Act will reimburse us the full amount in the balance. So no matter what, we have $2.7 million from the CARES Act that we will get if we don't get full fund reimbursement from FEMA. So having said that, we're on track. I know we've pretty much purchased everything that we have needed. And I believe the school, which the superintendent and Jim Mealy will discuss a little further on in this meeting about their expenditures and what their goals are. But I believe that we've been moving forward and purchasing everything that we've needed and given the school the ability to purchase what they've needed as well. I think we'll pretty much be made whole by the time this is all done. We're hoping they'll extend it because everything has to be done by December 31st. And we'll still have, CARES Act spending between January and June. So we'll have to figure out the mechanism to cover that as well. So anybody have any questions or concerns?
So I just want to confirm, Lynn, first, thank you for explaining that. So the CARES Act funding received or basically spent plus the FEMA submittal essentially gets us to close to that 2.7, right? And so,
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
So that's why it's structured that way. Essentially, we don't want to overspend if we don't have to. Like we don't want to spend the CARES Act money to spend it. However, we want to utilize as much as possible. Is that that's what we're doing?
Right. So we really actually have the full 2.7 from the CARES Act plus whatever we've submitted to FEMA.
Okay.
So in theory, we still have about $218,000 over and above what we've put through for projections to get us to the 2.7 with the CARES Act. So we actually would have 2.7 plus 183,000. So that's,
So we essentially have additional a couple $100,000,
right,
or whatever that it's 160 that we could
still spend. So if we find between now and December 31st that the school all of a sudden decides that there's some things that they needed more of, we can still purchase it. The way the CARES Act money works is it has to be purchased, received, and if it is anything that needs to be installed, has to be installed and in use by December 31st, or they won't reimburse us. So that's the only really issue that we have and concern, that some of the things that we've ordered aren't going to arrive in time, but we're stressing it with the vendors that if we're ordering this, we have to have and receive it before December 31st, or we won't be able to get reimbursed unless the government decides to extend it and change that deadline. So, I mean, our goal is to purchase as much as we need, even if we have to purchase stuff that we're buying now that we can use in January to June, but we've received it by December 31st.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's helpful. And so do you think that we'll max that out? Or at this
That's
point,
my
you're just not
goal.
sure?
That's my goal, to do
Got
that.
it.
And pretty much on the town side, we're pretty much set with what we've put in for estimates in our POs, our open POs that we have. So the way it looks to me is that most of the balance that we have available is going to go to the schools and allow them to get
Okay.
what they, finish needing, or that they, discover that they need, in addition to what they've already purchased.
Okay. All right, that was great. Helpful. Does anyone have any additional questions for Lynn on this? No. Okay. Thank you, Lynn.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move to our next item. I just wanted to briefly, and Donovan can also discuss this, as can Jim and Greg and Lynn, but we had a Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee meeting on October 21st. So if you look at some of the documents that were in our folder, there's a budget status report that Lynn produced from October 14th that talked about the first, that talks about basically the financials up to September 30. And then you'll see at the kind of added to the end of that is a memo that the town manager, Melissa Rodriguez, produced and disseminated to the select board that essentially talks about how the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee met. We reviewed the revenues that have come in thus far for the year, for fiscal year 21, and we felt that the committee felt that revenues were on track. Therefore, both the schools and the municipal departments could begin spending new initiatives. They could move forward on new initiatives, and that was part of the MOU that was signed between the schools and the select board and the school committee last year, and endorsed wholeheartedly by the finance committee. So at this point, Donovan, do you have anything to add? Kind of anything that we talked about that you want to?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think I would just reinforce what you said, that everything looked terrific. I appreciate all that Lynn and the town manager and Dr. Mealy and Dr. Gilligan have done. I mean, I think they've done a great amount of work to get everything where it is given the circumstances. So kudos to all of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed. So essentially, you can review this in more detail if you have questions. You'll see that revenue is generally, for the most part, where we thought it would be. Obviously, the enterprise funds, the Stevens Estate in particular, is not performing well given the fact that COVID-19 has a direct impact on the ability to hold functions. But we knew that, and we've discussed that at our last meeting. But I do want to say that again, so that we don't forget that exists, and that will continue to be something we'll need to discuss. However, besides that, I mean, things are looking kind of where I think Lynn and Melissa predicted they would be, and that this fiscal year would not be as concerning, and that looking forward as part of this year's budgeting process for FY22, we'll need to take a harder look at our revenue projections, and we are doing that actually on Thursday. So the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee is meeting again on Thursday to review the revenues, and Lynn produced some great documents that she sent out today to the committee. We'll review those, and then after Donovan and I can share all of that information and send those documents out to you guys for review as well, so you can see them and see what kind of we discussed. So that kind of leads us to our next agenda item, which is a discussion and presentation from Assistant Superintendent Mealy and Superintendent Gilligan regarding kind of the school's financial position in terms of what spending they have done because of COVID-19, and then what that looks like going forward, especially in light of now having kind of agreed that it's appropriate for new initiatives, if necessary, to be put in place going forward. And one thing that we did vote on, and I don't want to forget to say, is that we know that although new initiatives, we believe it's appropriate to move forward on them, we also anticipate that we may have additional expenses that are not budgeted because of COVID-19. So we have to be cognizant of that. And I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Mealy and Superintendent Gilligan, and they can talk a bit about that as it relates to the schools. Lynn, did you just want to add anything about the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee before we do that?
No, I mean, you covered everything. I just want to reiterate that, based on the first quarter, which is, a good indicator because it's, it's 3 months worth of activity, that we are on target. We've had a couple other individual non-reoccurring things that have hit the revenues as well, which will help out moving forward if we have any shortfalls in any of the other line items or revenue sources. I mean, the one that might change a little bit between now and the next quarter, of course, is the meals tax with the new restrictions that the governor has put in place as of last Friday. We are, about $30,000 short for the quarter on the meals tax, but that might change a little more dramatic in the second quarter, which is the next 3 months, because the restaurants are going to have to close so early and they're not going to be able to stay open as late as they typically would. But I will keep everybody posted on that. I think I should have my next payment from them the beginning of December. So I'll keep you posted. But anything else seems to be, falling right in place. I mean, I don't see any issues right now. So.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, I will turn it over to Superintendent Gilligan and Assistant Superintendent Mealy, and they can discuss their presentations.
Well, folks, thanks for having us tonight. Really appreciate it. Typically, I look forward to this more in person up in the conference room here, but albeit this will suffice tonight. And before we get started, I do want to just remind folks, anyone at home, thanks to all of our veterans here in North Andover, and there is a virtual Veterans Day celebration tomorrow at 10 o'clock on both cable channels as well as NACAM. And just also a reminder, there is no school tomorrow. It is a holiday. So I tweeted it out, but any chance I get to say it, as a remind folks, I like to. So thanks. To say that opening up school this year was a challenge would be an understatement. It's something that has never been done in the history of the world, in the way in which we had to open school, and significant challenges, particularly around safety and all the mitigating practices and procedures around staffing, particularly things that came out from the Commonwealth and the state. I think the first guidance came out June 25th, and I think they had 8 or 9 after that that were up over 250 pages, of significant guidance and some mandates, many unfunded. So tonight we want to talk about really what are the things we have to do to open up school, keep us safe, the staffing involved, the purchasing of things like PPE and furniture, things along the lines of special education, in different services for students' needs. And I'd say last but not least, technology has played a big role in terms of equity for all and really getting everyone a device in the district, and also upgrading the system at town hall and here in the schools. And thank God we did, as we had some challenges a couple weeks ago. I'm going to have Jim kind of walk us through the lines, but I would have to just say, I'd be remiss not to say that, Lynn and the town manager, Melissa Murphy Rodriguez, and Dr. Mealy and I, we meet weekly, and sometimes, we're meeting weekly with the COVID task force for other reasons. Lynn, you don't join us on that one, but often Lynn is with us on the finances piece. And it's really nice to have a collaborative relationship to work together, because, the CARES Act money, the money from the state in terms of education money towards per student, all these things were so needed in order for us to run, a complete remote academy, which is known as online academy, to hire, the staffing needed just to do just about everything from contact tracing to health, nurses, etc. So Dr. Mealy, I don't know if you can, if we are linked live or you're going to present on the screen.
I'm going to present. Yeah.
So, so we'll get started there.
Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Yep. So what we're talking about tonight is the actual and projected FY21 spending due to COVID-19. And we've broken it out. We think it makes the most sense to look at it. As Lynn was talking, she mentioned that some of these funds are only available until December 31st. We have to spend by December 31st, and that includes the CARES Act money and the grant that we got for the school district, one of the grants. So we broke it out by expenses from July 1 to December 31st, and then the revenue sources to that point, and then from January 1st to June 30th for both categories as well. So for July 1 to December 31st, the expenses that we have already seen, as Lynn mentioned, and are projecting to that point, the big salary item comes from OLA, what we call Online Academy. That's the opportunity we had to make available to parents who were not comfortable with having their students in person in school. And so we created the Online Academy, and we had to staff that. And the salaries to do so is $518,000 up until December 31st. Other staffing costs include, you may have seen people out in the summertime, both town and school, delivering meals, providing the meals, our custodians providing their overtime to clean our buildings. Those kind of staffing costs are going to total $389. Technology, most of that has to do with providing Chromebooks for all students. That's $671,000. The PPE, as Lynn mentioned, that's $873,000, but that's because we're trying to make sure we use all of that money from the CARES Act. And so not only are we providing, but we're stockpiling as much as we can to get it in hand prior to December 31st. The outside professional services of $299, that's mostly special education services that we need to provide. The materials and supplies and the classroom supplies are those things when you're making sure that the classrooms are equipped how they should be to ensure spacing and the materials that the extra materials we need to provide the in-person school learning. And then contracted services. You've seen the tents at both the middle school and high school. We're renting those. So that item is for those types of things. I put transportation here just so I can speak to it, that we're not seeing any additional costs, but we're not seeing a savings either. What we did was we had some days in September that normally would have been in-person days in bus service, but we didn't start until later. And then we're not transporting on Wednesdays. But what we are doing is we've created a extra runs for the kindergarten, because we now have AM, PM kindergarten. So we were able to work it out with the transportation company to trade off the savings we were seeing in the days not used for the extra runs. So we were able to do that. That was very good of them to be able to work that out with us. So those are the expenses. They total almost $3.5 million. And then to cover that up until December 31st, Lynn talked about how the schools are seeing most of the CARES Act money. $2.3 million of it would be what we would need to cover the $3,481,000. We received the CVRF grant for per pupil amount, and that's $1,057,000, and that's helping cover all those expenses. We also received an Esser Grant of just over $300,000, but we only need 116 of that. So we're kind of pocketing the rest because that grant does not end on December 31st. So we're using some of that for our expenses expected after from January 1 on. And then I have the general fund in there. We're also banking some funds in the general fund, which you'll see in the next couple of slides, but we haven't had to use any of that money up until now because we've had all of the grant and the CARES Act money. So we're going to be able to cover those expenses up until December 31st.
Can I ask a quick question before you move on?
Yep.
Okay. Could you just quickly explain the two grants that are listed there? I think we're all really familiar with the CARES Act and the parameters, but if you could just,
Yep.
for us and for the public, just let us know what those are, that'd be helpful.
Right, the Esser Grant is mainly geared towards trying to get students back in class and the materials and staffing and supplies that might be needed. So that is actually managed by our Assistant Superintendent for Student and Learning, Lorene Marks. And then the RLTE is a technology grant that Mike Grant, our technology director, applied for, and it provides for technology needs as a result of COVID-19. But as I said, we've been able to cover those with the others, so we're moving that into after January 1.
Okay. And what about the CVRF?
So that's the amount per student that all school districts in the state were provided. So our total is $1,057,000.
Understood. Okay.
And again, that was specifically for getting students back in school. All right, so what we expect for expenses from January 1 to June 30th, again, OLA, our online academy, about 43% of the activity takes place up until December 31st, and about 57% of the school days and activity take place from January 1 on. So that's why this number is higher after January 1 than it is before. It's $687,000. Our other staffing costs, again, additional staff for overtime, for custodial overtime, for additional monitors in our schools to make sure all the protocols and procedures are being followed properly. And we're certainly glad to say that so far it seems to be working really well. While we've had some cases, they've been cases that have happened outside of school, and we haven't seen any in-school spread. So that's very encouraging right now. There's the technology. So any technology needs we have from January 1 on would be covered by that grant. Outside professional services, again, that's mostly special education services. We're estimating $245,000, and then contracted services of $50,000. Again, transportation's here, but we don't see an additional cost to that as of right now. Obviously, things can change if things change in our model, but we're not anticipating that right now. And then I put down, just so you're aware, that there was a loss of circuit breaker funding. Last year it was 75%. They thought it might be 75% this year, but it only ended up being 70%, which results in a loss of $102,000 to the district. So for funding, again, the CARES Act and the CVRF grant go away as of December 31st. There's $191,000 left in the Esser Grant that we'll be able to use. The technology grant will have that $71,000 available. And then the money that we've banked in the general fund comes from unfilled positions. And those are both new positions that we created. Sasha mentioned the fact that we could now go ahead with new initiatives, but we made the decision that there were some positions we didn't need to fill this year. It just didn't make sense. Those included the registrar, the elementary teachers, because obviously we don't have space to add. We were looking for space to be able to do our 6 feet distancing, and the assistant principal that we had pegged for the elementary level. So those positions, we ended up filling 6 of the 11 new positions. So 5 are unfilled. And then for those who were on the Finance Committee last year, you may remember we talked about the fact that we were looking at reducing positions, especially around TAs. We've been trying for a few years to get a handle on the number of TAs. And so when we had talked about 11 new positions, we actually thought that we would be reducing, that we would have a net negative number of new FTEs. And so we actually have reduced by 16 TAs. And that's why we have this available fund of $620,000 that we can put towards the COVID expenses. That would leave $497,000, so almost $500,000. That one thing we're hoping for is that all of these funds have been made available to us through the CARES Act and the CVRF grant up until December 31st, but we're hopeful that there'll be another wave of stimulus funds that are made available because, you know, all the school districts are in the same boat. So we're hopeful that that might happen. And if it does, then this would be covered. If it doesn't happen, 102,000 of that could certainly come from the Special Education Stabilization Fund. And then the remaining amount, we would be looking at the MOU and the mechanism that we had put in place through the MOU to meet the rest of it. And then the last slide, I just wanted to show what I was talking about with regards to the positions. We filled 6. Those are mostly, there was a 6th grade teacher and then special education programs that we filled. And then we left 5 unfilled, and there were 16 existing positions, mostly TA positions, for a net change in benefit eligible positions of -15. The asterisk I put in here is, in order to staff OLA, we had to bring people on for a year. So they're not, you know, a big question. The 2 big issues were insurance eligible and then OPEB liability positions. So they are not OPEB liability positions because they're only 1-year positions, but they are benefit eligible. So anticipating the question of how many of those 1-year positions actually partake in it, there's 2 of them, only 2. So our net change in benefit eligible positions is actually down 15. So I just wanted to point that out. Any questions?
Yeah, I will turn it over to the board if anyone has, to the committee, if anyone has questions before I ask a couple.
This is Regina. I have a couple questions. So just point of clarification, is the OLA staffed with all new positions?
Not all. No,
No.
it's a combination of some people who, for whatever the medical reason may have been, or whatever the reason may have been, they couldn't be in person, but they could be available. So some of those staff are doing OLA. We did bring some new ones on, and then the middle school and high school kind of are utilizing people in both ways, as hybrid, in person, and in OLA. So it's a combination of all of those.
Okay.
Yep. So there's a couple backfilled and there's a couple that, you know, they're 1-year positions.
Yep. And I guess my other question is just more general. I'm assuming that all of this estimated expenses and so on is assuming that we continue with this same model throughout the school year of hybrid with OLA and so on. Is there like alternative plans that say, well, if we were to, I'm just thinking about Baker, something I saw in the news recently about him suggesting that all kids should be back in school. Maybe he meant hybrid. I didn't really actually read it and get into it in that much detail. But I mean, if there were a scenario where, if there was an alternative scenario, everybody has to go to OLA because of a really big outbreak, or it's under control, everybody's going to come back into school. Like, has there been some analysis to say this is how that would affect the expenses? I guess we only need to be concerned if they were to go up. If they're down, great.
Well, I think the most important thing to know is, so the OLA, right, it's an entity in and of itself. And when you're in the hybrid model, that's a continuum. So the hybrid model could be, if allowed by the safety guidelines and the medical folks, in school with all the precautions taken and appropriate PPE, a hybrid model like we have now, or completely remote as part of the hybrid model. And the online academy students, I mean, they're online, you know, same coursework, same school system, but they're just out, they're not within that continuum.
And Regina, I think you reached that conclusion right at the end there, where if we go fully remote, we're not really going to see additional expenses. Where we might see them is, as you mentioned, if we try to go fully in. But even then, we have all of the same needs in that situation. So I wouldn't anticipate much more in expenses. My biggest concern in that situation would be transportation, because right now we're utilizing all our vehicles and we're only transporting up to 6th grade. If we need to bring kids, if all kids need to be transported every day, that's going to be a true challenge. I'm not sure how we do it if we and maintain the space that we have on the buses.
Yeah, so the transportation's only can run at 32% capacity of what we had before. And, following the governor and the commissioner, as I do very closely, I'm proud that we have our kids in. They're doing a great job in terms of this in school, the social distancing, the mask wearing, the hand washing, all that stuff, because there are a lot of districts where kids aren't in school. They may have some hybrid models, but kids have not stepped foot in school in a lot of communities locally, particular grade levels, or in some cases, the entire community. So it's it's something we watch very closely. And part of the reason we plan the way we did is we need to have something that's sustainable that we can maintain throughout the course of the year.
And the reason I say that I'm worried about transportation is because it doesn't matter. The money is not the issue. Even if we said, okay, we can spend more, there just aren't the buses available to do it. So that's the biggest concern for when we do try to transition into fully in.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Please.
Dr. Gilligan and Millie, thank you. I have a question about the technology. I understand, the outlay for hardware and software and all that stuff. Do you anticipate that the equipment you've invested in will be able to sustain us for the rest of the year, barring a massive equipment failure or something like that? I mean, you're not anticipating or budgeting any additional big purchases in terms of technology?
No, actually, the only difficulty we're experiencing right now is delivery. Not surprisingly, all districts are trying to get those devices.
Yep.
So we were fortunate that we ordered earlier than a lot did, so we've got what we needed. We still have some staff issues as far as like TAs need to participate, so we've kind of patched together for them. But we've got some units coming in for them, and then the other devices that will be coming in will certainly give us some extras as units maybe break down and need to be replaced. But we don't anticipate, from what we've ordered and have not yet delivered, needing anything further after that.
Okay, that's great. What about the network infrastructure side?
So on the network infrastructure side, it was really interesting. It seemed like a challenge early on, and we really knew early on, before the commissioner and the state came out with anything in June. We knew way back in the spring, pretty early, that technology was going to play a big role. So we were fortunate enough to be able to have Comcast come in and put in a 5 gigabyte fiber, because we have, and it has served us well this fall, up until recently, a 1 gigabyte copper wire, and it was really stable. And I think we've been lucky to work with the town since we're consolidated with the tech, because the ability to track the firewall versus, I mean, I learned so much about tech when we had that catastrophic failure a couple weeks back, and it seems like it was a couple months ago, but it was just a little while ago. It's pretty complicated stuff, and I would just say that the school staff with Mike Grant and Dave Broder and the town side, pretty remarkable. And at this point, we're up and running on the fiber, and we have been since we got back up and running after that event. So things are looking really positive at this time, and I think those investments are going to pay off in the long run.
Great. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Any additional questions? So I have a couple, specifically as it relates to new initiatives. So you mentioned some that you don't plan on moving forward with, but is there a way to understand, how the ones that you do plan on moving forward, like what the breakdown here? Could you kind of provide us with, at some point, here's what we proposed in our budget presentation last year. here's what we have moved forward with, or we will, will move forward with, and here's what we're not going to. And that's what that number that you kind of provided is comprised of, the unfulfilled position number.
Yeah, so it's actually pretty simple. If you recall, there was one sixth grade team at the middle school that was down, that needed one more teacher. We did move forward with that one. The Brad Street had a special education program that needed to be created, and that was done. The high school needed a special education teacher, and the middle school severe needs program. Those are the positions that you see there.
And a couple other things. I mean, we really, that position was really critical in my mind about the assistant principal at the Atkinson and all of our elementary schools. If you think about it, there's a principal, and you have this many kids. There are no other administrators in the building, but we held off on that position. And what we ended up doing is we transferred the halftime assistant principal out of the Franklin school and moved it to the Atkinson for this school year. To hold off on that, we thought it was a creative way to support the school that we thought we could use that position the most, being cognizant of the fact that there are a lot of COVID-related staffing things that we needed to do, and we thought that this was in our best interest to hit the things that were mandated by law and what is best for our kids who are on IEPs, as well as, Jim, we used some money on an English language learner position too, some funding there. So. In terms of staffing, we didn't hire the registrar. There's a couple classroom positions we didn't hire. We didn't hire the assistant principal. But at the same time, we were dealt this hand where we, basically we had to recreate a elementary size school with about 2 weeks prior to the start of the school year. So.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of what you predict for, or what you're forecasting for the actual year of 2021, so the second page of your presentation, or the expenses and funding from January to June. So you're essentially saying, if I'm looking at slide 5, that the unfulfilled positions by delaying new initiatives is saving you $620,000, but that there will be a need of almost $500,000 that will pull from other sources that's unbudgeted. Am I?
So yeah, just one clarification. The unfilled positions contribute to that 620,000. The unfilled existing positions, mostly TAs, help make up the rest of it. So it's a combination of the two, not just the newly created positions. But then you're right that there's 497,000 left that we would hope gets covered by stimulus, but really of the 497, 102 should be covered from the Special Education Stabilization Fund instead. So you're looking at 395 that if we don't get additional stimulus money, we would have to fund.
Okay. Does everyone do those numbers make sense to everyone, especially, given last year's budget presentation and what we know? Do you have additional questions for Jim or Greg?
Sasha, I'll have one question, and it's maybe a bit more in general. I mean, we're basically going into a business plan period. You have to deliver a business plan in, what's that, 4 weeks, 6 weeks? So what's the general assumptions about, and I think, adding on to Regina's question, so what you're thinking is happening next year? What's your approach for the next business plan?
Yeah,
well,
go ahead, Gilly.
I'll start and then I'll let Jim go. I mean, we're going to have to continue working closely with the town manager and the town side. And, we have to prepare to go into next year, with a couple plans. From an educational standpoint, we have to think about, okay, Are we going to be back to business as usual in a typical school year for the start of fall 2021? Or could we find ourselves in somewhat of a similar position that we are today or somewhere in the middle? So, you have to kind of go in with a mindset that we could still be dealing with COVID, and how will that impact what we need in our planning going forward? We also have to take a look at, what are our typical needs going into a school year, and also take into consideration, all the things that are happening in terms of revenues, in terms of Chapter 70 funding, all the things that are coming in from the state and local, to make the best decisions to support our kids. Jim, I don't know if you're going to add something different or.
I was pretty much going to say the same thing, just kind of the mechanism for that, Thomas, and it's a great question. Lynn and I were talking about this, that what we think makes the most sense is to prepare our budget for our annual expenses that we need to have year after year, and then identify those one-time expenses for if we're in a similar situation. What are those one-time expenses? Because one-time expenses are much different than annual year after year expenses. So we're going to have to build our budget to account for both, but we need to be able to separate the two as well.
Sasha, I've got a quick question.
Yeah.
Thinking of going into next year's budget, do you think that it's a possibility that you will be looking to need to fund classes or something for students over the summer, considering that a lot of the kids are going to be struggling or in a different place, or maybe it's just been such an unusual year? Has any thought been given to what might happen to continuing classes of some sort over the summer? And what would that look like? And well, that's a lot to ask for you to speculate.
From an educational standpoint, Chris, I could go on for quite a bit with that. But, overall, we're taking assessments now. We're finding out, throughout the start of this year where kids are at, because kids different places, and that's typical in a normal year. But also figuring out, okay, are there gaps missing in terms of, if they were supposed to have this geometry section at this specific time at a grade level, do we miss that, and how do we make that up? So we've been working on that now. So that's certainly something to consider. And I think the other point to really consider is, what compensatory services may we owe or need to provide in terms of students who receive, special education services here in North Andover. So those are two things that we're keeping in mind. And, I think that I think the first one, I think, is something we can be really proactive and do some, really good stuff. And, whether it's partnering with the library or, anything that Miss Marks and our team put together, pretty excited about. And then in terms of, providing compensatory services to students on individual education plans, IEPs, we have to take a look at what that may be too. So
it just seems like an extraordinary year, and I wouldn't be surprised if you had people making inquiries as to, what will this summer look like? Because it's going to be different, and it's hard to believe that our school year is just going to end at a date in June. I mean, it certainly didn't start at the right time, and things have changed throughout the year. You don't know how much what's going to happen between now and the summer. I just see, and not only that, but I mean, if the difficulties of having a lot of people in class remain the way it is now, the warmer weather is going to be an opportunity to have classes again outdoors. So it's just, anyway, it's just a thought. Mm-hmm. Thank you, though, for paddling your way through this. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Sasha, one more. We're talking always about all the bad things and how difficult it is, and it's more expensive. Are there anything that is actually, something good comes out of it, which we might actually, keep and maintain? Just wondering.
I think there will be tremendous things that change coming out of this for the positive. If you really think about it, so I was thinking about my grandparents, and they would have been pretty old. They were probably born in like 1905, 1906. But schools, the American high school for the last 100 years has had bells. Typically, it's about an hour. There's grades of A, B, C, D. And I remember starting this profession 20 years ago saying, 20 years from now with technology, things are going to be different. And, the more, we become advanced, the more schools have really stayed the same everywhere. What I think will come out of this that will be really good is I think that, there'll be an opportunity to particularly connect with parents for, IEP meetings with the principal. I think the video conferencing technology, rather than the traditional coming in for a meeting and taking time out of work, I think there'll be really good things there. I also think that there'll be some really, you know, tremendous technology advances that our teachers will be using, whether it's like a flipped video or it's different apps. So I think there'll be good things that come out of this as well, and I think that some of that's going to be tech. On the flip side, the only one caution about tech is just the screen time and some of that. Hopefully we can read books and do some of those other things. So.
Yep.
So I'll add that, we're hearing from teachers that they're excited about some of the things that are working well that they think will make when we do get back to normal even better. So they're excited about that. That's one good thing. As far as, might be an odd one, but as far as our revolving accounts go, community programs are taking a hit, not surprisingly, and the preschool has a lot less students this year than in the past. So they're not seeing the revenue they normally do. We've been able to offset that. That's included in our projections for the general fund. But the food services revolving account is seeing a boom because, one, they worked all summer delivering meals and they get reimbursed for every meal provided. So they had been struggling for the last few years to just make it. And coming out of this, I would think they're going to have a pretty positive balance, which will be nice.
Interesting. Okay.
And last but not least, I really have to compliment our kids. I was in an AP Gov class, AP History class today at the high school for a while, talking to our kids. I think that two things that will be interesting, I think, as challenging as it has been for many of you that have been at home and working from home, there are a lot of folks who I've spoken to over this time that say it's been a real challenge over the summer. It was a challenge last spring. We're all adapting to this new normal now, but they really appreciated all the time that they had with their kids, something that normally wouldn't happen. So I thought that was really kind of an interesting piece. And I think the other thing is our kids are really resilient. They are very, they follow the rules. They're doing all the right things in school. And I think when they look back at this later in their lives, they'll be stronger people for having worked through this and worked through it together. So.
Okay. Good. Do we have any more comments or questions? This is really helpful for me, at least, to see this breakdown, and I might have some more questions later once I digest your presentation a bit, but this is really, I think, really helpful. So I appreciate you taking the time. I know you guys have, tomorrow is no school, right? So some time to.
Correct.
So we won't keep you too long. Any other final questions? All right, well, thank you so much, Superintendent Gilligan and Assistant Superintendent Mealy. We really appreciate it. And we will see you shortly, I guess, right, for as we move into the next budgeting process.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so
for
much.
Have a great night.
Night.
You too.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to old business. Any old business anyone would like to discuss at this point? The only thing I will say is that Chris and I have been discussing the calendar for the year. And so what we're going to do is we are going to, I think Chris worked especially diligently on this, and I thank her very much for it. But we are going to just review that quickly together. And what we'll do is we will put that on everyone's calendar. We'll have Jillian Brothers send that out to everyone, so you have it on your calendar for the next budget season. And if there's any meeting that you find like, I can't do that, I'm on vacation, or if there's something that we missed, a school holiday or something that, shoot one of us an email or shoot both of us an email, we can always adjust. It's really just so everyone can try to plan in advance, and also so we can get some space so Kim doesn't have, a bunch of meetings all in one day. Okay. The next thing is the prior meeting minutes. If everyone wants to take a minute, if you haven't already, to review those and provide any comments or make a motion to approve them.
Hey, Sasha, this is Donovan. I would make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting.
I have a
Chris
motion
Allen,
to.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say I have a motion to approve the minutes from September 22nd. So I have a second.
Yes, Chris Allen, second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 No opposition. Anyone up? All right, approved. The meeting minutes are approved. Anyone else? Anything else you'd like to discuss before we adjourn the meeting? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
No, Sasha, not so quick.
Yeah.
When you ask, it's basically the same question. How are we, approaching the business plan? It's a difficult time. I mean, what are the assumptions? Should we delay it a little? I'm not proposing to delay it, but maybe it doesn't really make a difference if you delay it or not. But what's the overall approach here? I mean, business as usual, or we let them just do the thing they did the last couple of years, or I don't know. I'm wondering about that going into that cycle. And I know from a business standpoint, yes, we struggled as well, but kind of managed it. And there is a lot of stuff that will stay with us, and we're not going back to the old way doing things, And why would that be different for a school or a town, And that's why I was asking, what did they learn? What did the town learn, from that experience, and does that might have an impact on how we do, conduct our services going forward. Technology, yes, I know there's a big push, and we started early. Online permitting is certainly helpful. So that's just my thoughts over the last couple of weeks, going into the next cycle. Should we let them just do the same thing as always, or expect a bit of a different approach?
So I think that ultimately, we are going to, we don't create policy, right? So they're gonna, in terms of like letting them, I guess, I hear you, but I think they are going to produce what they think is the best operating model, and we can hopefully help talk about, and Thomas, I think you started that conversation, how they're going to present that from a financial perspective, which Jim and Lynn are already talking about. And I think the first step for us as a committee is this week. So Donovan and I will be in the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee meeting. We'll see how Lynn is kind of proposing we interpret the revenue forecast for the next fiscal year. I think we start there, see what that looks like, and then we try to be, forward thinking in how we request the presentations and the information we're provided, and go from there. I think that's where we start.
No,
What do you think, Thomas? Sorry, I can't tell if there's a delay or not. We're not in person, so.
Yeah, I know. I'm not suggesting that I was just, so many things have changed for me over the last 6 months, and I would say for some of the stuff, I'd like to go back as quickly as possible to the old one. And there's a lot of stuff where I said, hey, that was really cool and that was really great. We don't want to go back to that. And that has significantly changed our approach of planning the business. A very different approach, and with a lot of different focus on how we go forward with our business model. So we learned a lot out of the last 6 months, and so I was just wondering if that's something we want to expect when we have these discussions with them, that there is more of a different approach. I'm not saying that I understand we're not a policymaker, but anyway, so that was just my thought of the day.
No, understood. I think it makes a lot of sense. And one thing I was thinking about a little bit to your point, Thomas, but didn't ask is, and to Chris's point too, thinking about the summer, but also thinking about next year. So if we're still in the same position where there's the social distancing that's required, and the hope is always to get kids fully back in school, what kind of things can we start planning and thinking about both, they'll think about operationally and then discuss with us financially, should we be planning in advance? Because now we have the opportunity to do that, and we have, the school department has experience in figuring those kind of logistical things out. For example, more tents or whatever it may be, to utilize space in a different way, or looking to other school districts to see what they have done, and then it trickles down to us in terms of how that impacts the municipality financially, right? So you have a good point.
I think we're all really tired, Sasha. We don't mean to be quiet. I'm tired.
It's hard. No. It's hard to gauge on a video chat. So any other questions or comments before we adjourn the meeting? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn. Chris Allen.
Donovan O'Connell, I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed? Hearing none, I call this meeting adjourned. The meeting is adjourned.